This is the third video in the series regarding online divorce lawyer service. This video will concentrate on the online divorce lawyer control panel, which is sort of the control center for not only individual cases, but for some functions, all of your cases. So it's easy to get to your control panel. We're going to use the pro level sample landing page of the fictitious attorney Robert I. Powell. This will be what your ODL pro level landing page would look like. We try and make this look as close as possible to your firm's main website. So the fastest way to get to your control panel is to come down the bottom, access the hidden link in the footer. You see when you move your cursor over the footer that it becomes a link. You click on that link. That takes you to the lawyer login panel. We're going to use, if I can remember the correct user ID and password on the pro level sandbox account. And you click on login to control panel. Okay, I guess I did not remember. Nope. Okay. I'm going to leave this in. You have to use your own secure lawyer password, not the client's password. So that illustrates something that I need to remember also. So when you log into the control panel, you don't use the client's password, you use your own password. And lo and behold, that works. This is your control panel, and I'm just going to go top to bottom, left to right. Upper left is a lot of case information, the user ID, the case type, R for regular, S for summary, and P for publication. The case number appears here once the case has been filed. The relationship type, this is the most common, of course, opposite sex marriage. There are 4 or 5 abbreviations that will show up, and that will tell you the type of relationship that's involved. If it is, for example, a same-sex marriage and a domestic partnership at the same time, you'll have 2 codes in that box. This is the date that the client hired you, date of filing of the case, date of service or the date of jurisdiction, date of entry of judgment, and date of termination of marital status once it's been entered. Online divorce lawyer is primarily for uncontested California divorce. However, in a surprisingly large number of cases, the respondent will either mistakenly file a response or will file a response when perhaps the issues that are at issue are not that complex and can be negotiated out quite easily. So when that happens, you can come here and you enter true or false into that box, save the response, and that will save the most recent entry you've made into that box. What does that do? What it does is it enables you to perhaps add an increased fee, because clearly this would not be a document review case if the respondent answers. It would enable you to negotiate or mediate out whatever issues there are between the parties, and to have the respondent then sign an appearance stipulation and waiver to remove his response. But you of course need to populate the forms later in the case, particularly the FL 180 and the FL 170, to indicate that the respondent did in fact appear. So there are several locations throughout the judgment batch of documents where whatever is in this box here, be it true or false, will cause different entries to be made. In an opposite sex marriage, this is the petitioner's sex, W for wife. When it's a same-sex marriage or an opposite sex domestic partnership, these two boxes are used here, and gender then is either M for male or F for female. Let's see, this is an indication that the client has paid. You can change that. If, let's say, the client gives you a check, the check bounces, you can enter false in there, and that will prevent the client from advancing in the interview, and then you save that entry there. If you need to change your client's password, right there, save the new password. This is the communications area here, petitioner's phone number, email. You don't need to worry about updates. That's set to true, and you don't need at the pro level of service to worry about the doc check either. That's hardwired in as true all the time. Navigation is towards the right. You can exit to the lawyer login from which you just came, even though instances where you're going to need to exit to the client login are going to be few and far between. It's there just for the sake of completion. You can navigate to the download panel here, and that would be in case you needed to jump over to download any documents. It's a very common activity in ODL that you may need to go to the control panel to check on something. It turns out to be okay. You then would switch over immediately to the download panel to do downloads, which I've demonstrated in the 2 prior videos, and you can then also, when you're done, jump back to the control panel. Here is where you can specify the last 10, 20, 30, 50, 100, or all of 2 things to be pulled up onto the screen: cases and leads. Cases are easy to understand. Those are just your ODL cases, bearing in mind that Robert I. Powell is a fictitious lawyer and that we've used him primarily to debug our programming. He really only has one user ID that where any sort of data has been entered at all. So this is not what your actual My Cases report will look like. Yours will be all populated, of course, with your clients' names down here, the courts down here, case number, and you can tell how far the case has gone. A lot of cases never finalize, as I'm sure you're aware. Many cases get filed and served, and you'll never hear from the client again. So that's that. You can also download the report to your machine, and in the download version, you download it just by clicking up here, though your Adobe PDF can be set up differently from machine to machine. So how I've got it set up on my machine is that the download button is there. You will almost certainly know how to download PDFs online. In the download version, there's a separate column on the right for you to make notes. It's a good idea maybe once a week or so to print out one of these, just so you can keep track of where your cases are, how many cases are coming up on 31 days after the date of jurisdiction. In a non-military case, it's time to submit the judgment batch of documents. So that's that. And then the other thing that you can keep track of on screen or by download is your leads. On the top page of Online Divorce Lawyer, the divorce consumer has an opportunity to enter name, zip code, phone number, and any message, and email also. These are all just tests that I've put in myself to make sure the the coding works and to work out any bugs that were in there after the first draft. So similarly, you can download that report also. It's a good tool for you to keep notes, perhaps over here on the hard copy that you keep by the phone. It just keeps you up to date. You can put your follow-up notes here if the lead needs to be called back at some point in time. So that's that. Back to the control panel. Some of this stuff I'm going to move quickly over. It's obvious. Petitioner name, respondent name, addresses, both residential at the top, mailing at the bottom. This text box here records for posterity the original street that they enter. There's an explanation for that. I won't ramble on about it. It's the purpose of it is security. Let's put it that way. It's a good idea to know what your client has entered initially. It's a good due diligence point, is my explanation for that entry. This section here is for your case notes. I forget what the actual size of the possibility of this is, but you can expand it. It's big. You're not going to run out of space. You can enter your notes there. Every time that you have a phone call or an email, you can record it there. If the client tells you something you don't want to forget, you record it there. And each time you need to click Save Notes or it's gone. Next time you come back, it won't be there unless you click Save Notes. In the system from which Online Divorce Lawyer was derived, this section here was much more important. You really don't need to pay too much attention to this. It's automatic. These boxes will be populated with trues and falses. You'll see them change as different stages of the case go by. At some point, I'm going to create a manual which will provide data such as the abbreviations for opposite-sex marriage, same-sex marriage, and to give you the combinations of different trues and falses in these boxes that tell you basically where you are in the case. Basically forget about this section. You won't need it. Over here, moving back to the left, you've got case data. A lot of this is just self-explanatory. Different numbers mean different service methods. 5 happens to be notice and acknowledgement, but this can be anything. I think there are 7 or 8 options for acquiring jurisdiction over the respondent. Whether there's an MSA in the case, whether it's been downloaded, whether it's been signed, whether there's a request to waiver the court fees, was it approved on what date. This section here is used relatively frequently. Occasionally you will need to file a first amended petition. If you put a true in that box and save it, then the summons and petition that you print out will have the words summons on first amended petition, and the petition will have the box, the amended box checked. Later on in the case, the FL 165, the request to enter default, will indicate request to enter default on first amended petition. So that's what that does. Petitioners and respondents' former names are handled here. If it's a publication case, that goes in here. The client is given an opportunity on the very last, I think it's the very last interview page, to tell you anything that's on their minds that hasn't come up on any of the interview pages, which are listed over here. So that's that. Let's see here. Addresses we've done. property and debt. Community, separate, that's self-explanatory. Hybrid community property and hybrid community debt. Hybrid simply means it's not a piece of property or a debt that is going to be assigned and awarded completely to one party or divided 50-50, such as in a sale, though not necessarily in a sale. Hybrid means there's something else involved that's more complex, and if there is a true here in the MSA box, then when you download the MSA, the hybrid community property and or hybrid community debt items are going to be highlighted in red, and they will tell you this is a section where you need to do some custom writing, some custom drafting, if you will. If there's a quadro involved in the case, it's good to know that. That's entered automatically when the petitioner completes the property debt page. It's hard to see which one of these would have triggered it. It could have been any of these that are marked pension or retirement plan or just retirement. Any of those or all of them could trigger quadros. If that is triggered, there's a true in this box, and that triggers you, of course, to implement the portion of your client contract that enables you to ethically upsell that well-informed client to your quadro services. Let's see, this section here, community property, separate property, unascertained at time of petition. Sometimes clients, particularly those with high marital estates, will not want to list their property and the values of property on the petition and the property declarations filed at the initialization of the case. They don't mind the preliminary declaration of disclosure to their spouses, but they don't want their values to be public access, and so you would indicate true here, true here. Suitable annotations are made on the petition. You've got to be on the ball in such cases to make sure that the property and debt has been entered by the client before you get to the preliminary declaration stage. So a little bit of management involved there. This section is, again, client input, and it comes from the property debt page again. At the bottom, it tells them that clearly no online interview can encompass the entirety of a husband and wife's marital estate and all of the possible agreements and sub-agreements and tortuous agreements that they could possibly enter into. So at that point, they can enter that data. Very often when you see anything in here, it means you're going to have to ask the client to expand on the explanation. And very often their explanations require further questions. So that's something that you would then enter back in on your case notes up here. Let's see, spousal support. This is worded in a somewhat backwards way. No spousal support is false, so that means there is either a dollar value or reserved jurisdiction for one or both. In this case, it's reserved jurisdiction for both. And the rest of that is fairly explanatory. There's a code here payable on, it's either all on the 1st, all on the 15th, or half on the 1st, half on the 15th. And those code numbers are 1 through 3 respectively. Children are listed here. Name, dates of birth, lives with, sex, and whether they are whether their child support rights have been assigned to the county, if there's TANF or CalWORKs being received. Custody section, that code means something I can't quite remember right now on the tax dependency. Um, these are percentages of primary physical custody between the petitioner and the respondent, and the proposed basic child support. If you drop down, you can see that their proposed basic child support is 0. However, the guideline amount is $562. You'll notice that the guideline appears twice here. The reason for that is that this guideline section here is a what-if function. You can change the primary indicators that have causative effect to the guideline figure, namely the respondent's net monthly, the petitioner's net monthly, and the percentage of primary custody that each party has. Only the petitioner is listed here because the respondent is obviously the other 37%. So to demonstrate here, you can see that the guideline here is 562 based upon this information. Let's expand the petitioner's net monthly income to 5,000. Compute. And you can see the guideline goes down. It's still saved in the system as 562, but it goes down in the what if section to 212. And that figure, by the way, the 212 figure is not saved anywhere. That's what makes this a what if functionality. You can just play around with this section. Client's on the phone and says, well, what if my spouse, what if I have 5,000 and my spouse has 4,000? You just plug that right in. It's not the official California guideline formula. It's pretty darn close. It comes within a couple of dollars all the time, but it's cheap and nasty, and it's there. It's very functional, and you can see that last change, what effect it had to the guideline amount. Next time you load the control panel on this client, this figure here will come back to 562 again. So again, this doesn't get saved, and it tells you that down here. I think that's about it. That's the control panel and of Online Divorce Lawyer Pro level. No real difference between the Pro level and the basic level as far as the control panel is concerned. All the functionality is there for both levels of service. Okay, thanks for listening.